Good afternoon, beautiful people. This is episode 6 of the Clutch Down podcast. The craziness of free agency has started to slow down, and now we're less than 4 weeks away from the draft, so let's get into it. So my bluff this week comes from Rogelio from Mexico City. Hopefully I didn't butcher the sound on that too much, as you told me when you gave me the bluff, so I do apologize if I did. So his bluff is, there's a rule in the NFL that means a flag can be thrown for excessive crowd noise. I'm going to go false with this one. I think, especially when you've got places like Lumen Field, you know, the Seahawks Stadium, renamed from CenturyLink Field, where they regard the crowd as the 12th man for how they can put an offense off by being loud. I can't see how that would be true. Like, you often see quarterbacks these days going to a silent count or having a timeout because they don't hear the snap of the play call. And I feel like if it was a rule or if it was something that the refs were going to say about, they would have said it in some of those situations. I mean, even in the NFC Championship where you had the 49ers versus the Rams, it was kind of a running joke that the 49ers were technically the home team, even though it was being played at the Rams Stadium, because of how many 49ers fans turned up and also how loud they were being during the game. So yeah, I'm gonna go false on that. And I mean as well, especially you've got places like Arrowhead as well that are massively loud, so I can't really see how that would be true. Yeah! Right, yeah, so it was false. Okay, that's an interesting piece of trivia. So there was actually a rule on excessive crowd noise that existed from 1989 to 2007, but then in 2007 they got rid of it. Obviously, they found it quite hard to enforce because excessive noise is subjective. And they found that it actually motivated the fans to be louder. There's no real surprise there. So they'd actually penalise the home team for a delay of game and charge timeouts after a certain amount of warnings for excessive crowd noise. Yeah, I'm glad they got rid of this. Otherwise, it kind of just negates home field advantage for teams that are playing at home. So what's the point of the seeding process if you're just going to get to the playoffs and then the whole reason why you have home field advantage is because you want the crowd to be putting off the defense and be cheering on the offense, and then all of a sudden when it gets to the actual game, they're not allowed to do that. So yeah, I'm glad that's not a rule anymore. But yeah, thanks for that, Rogelio. Doing my best here, but I appreciate the bluff. That was a good one and a fun piece of trivia as well. Okay, so on to news and updates that have been happening in the NFL this week. So we still had some free agency moves, some important ones. For example, Bobby Wagner signed a 5-year deal with the Rams worth $65 million. Wagner was third in the league in tackles last season. Devontae Parker has been traded to the Patriots along with a 5th rounder for a 3rd round pick. This will likely mean the end of N'Keal Harry's Patriots tenure. More AFC West news as Xavier Howard signs a new deal which develops his contract into a 5-year contract worth $90 million. Howard's led the league twice in interceptions since he was drafted in 2016, and this makes him the highest paid cornerback in the league. It's a good sign for Miami. They get their star defensive player back, and Howard gets the money he deserves. In terms of coaches, John Harbaugh signed a 3-year extension for Baltimore. This season will be Harbaugh's 15th season, which makes him the 3rd longest tenured active head coach in the league. That is behind Bill Belichick and then Mike Tomlin, so Patriots and Steelers. In terms of players, there were a couple of players who retired actually this week. So Malcolm Jenkins retires after a great 13-year career. He's the only player in NFL history to win a Super Bowl against both Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and also had a ridiculous 2,651 snap streak during a period of his time with the Eagles. Frank Gore also has retired, finally signing a 1-day contract with the 49ers. He finishes his NFL career 3rd all-time in rushing yards with 16,000, a flat 16,000. So going from talking about players that were retired, let's talk about some new players and some new prospects. So this episode, now we're away from the free agency special, brings back the spotlight part of the podcast. Especially as we're getting closer to the draft in the next few weeks, we're going to feature a double spotlight. So we're going to take a draft prospect from offense and defense who I'll chat about. So the last guy I spoke about from offense was tackle Evan Neal, and from defense was Aiden Hutchinson. And my players this week are from offense, quarterback Malik Willis, and from defense, defensive end Kayvon Thibodeaux. So starting things off with Malik Willis, he's a 22-year-old quarterback, 6 foot tall and 225 pounds. Willis started his college career at Auburn before transferring to Liberty University in 2019. He sat out the 2019 season due to the NCAA transfer rules, but then went on to play 2 seasons at Liberty, compiling a 17-6 win-loss record. In his starting tenure at Liberty, he threw for 5,107 yards, 47 touchdowns, and 18 interceptions. His rushing stats were also impressive as he had 1,822 yards on the ground to go along with 27 rushing touchdowns. I like Malik from his tape. He keeps composure when he's under pressure, and he has some incredible arm talent, which makes him very, very fun to watch, and he can pretty much make any throw on the field. He's also a very patient scrambler. He's very talented when it comes to his legs. And when he scrambles out of the pocket, he keeps his eyes downfield. Also being very good at keeping his shoulders square again so he can throw accurately when he's on the run. I think despite this, sometimes he needs to find his check down and take it a bit easy on certain plays. He'll often go for the rush or extend the play. And in college, that's not as bad. But when he gets to the pros, that's going to lead to quite a few sacks where he makes the wrong decision. Also, sometimes he'll just throw the ball away rather than getting those few yards or even throw a hurried interception. Not only just the passing aspect of this, but he needs to protect himself in the pros. He didn't really have a good line when he was in college, and I think this whole not finding his check down and trying to make the play comes from a byproduct of not having a good line and him being the best player. So he's trying to make those plays and trying to make a difference. But I think when he gets to the NFL, he needs to kind of settle that down a little. He's got some crazy upside. I think, he's definitely going to be a first rounder, and I think he's going to be a good pick for a team. I'd say give him a couple of years to develop. I don't think he's going to be winning Rookie of the Year or having a mind-blowing first and second year in the NFL, but I think after a couple of seasons, when he's improved his decision-making a little and knows to just take what the defense gives him sometimes and learn to make those decisions a little better, I think he's going to be a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. Lots of links with him potentially with the Seahawks, and I think as a raw talent, he draws some comparisons to Russell Wilson, I'd say. Can scramble, can make plays, rush out of the pocket, can make all the throws downfield. So, all the parts that Russell Wilson has got. And also if you link him with Pete Carroll obviously worked with Russell Wilson as a rookie, and so he's had that experience of developing a young quarterback, and so it kind of is quite a good pair to go with. And also the Seahawks have obviously traded away their quarterback and gained a lot of draft capital, so they've got the ability to build a young team and give that team a chance to develop. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes, but I'm looking forward to watching Willis because he's fun to watch. Now on to defense, Kayvon Thibodeaux. So he's a 21-year-old defensive end who played his college football at Oregon for the Oregon Ducks. He's 6'5" and weighs 258 pounds and was named Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year in 2019. Then he was voted unanimously to the 2021 College Football All-American team. He played 30 games in his college career where he had 126 tackles, 35.5 tackles for loss, and 19 sacks. I think the first thing to mention about him is he's definitely a game wrecker, and a lot of that is due to his agility and his massively quick first step, which often knocks tackles off balance immediately. So when tackles get to him after he rushes, he has a tendency to already be too far past the block because of that step. So he obviously makes life a bit of a misery for them. He can also rush both inside and outside and get pressure, so it's not just tackles, it's guards and centers that have to be wary of him too. Even just his presence on the field keeps the quarterbacks under pressure. He had a 17.5% pass rush pressure rate in college, which was second behind Aiden Hutchinson. So all the mechanics are kind of there, but I think he does need to work on putting it all together. Sometimes he goes for a stutter step and his hands and feet will go out of sync, and then you use all of that speed that he naturally has. A big thing I notice is he's great when he gets into a rhythm, but plays like that where he loses his kind of momentum can knock him off, and he needs to tighten that up a bit to really have that consistency in the pros. Also, sometimes in run defense, he wants the big play so he can miss his assignment and miss his gap by going for the tackle instead. This can lead to holes because of that, so he just needs to become more disciplined. If he's there to set the edge, just keep the edge. If he's there to cover the inside, but just stay disciplined to the hole he's in. He's got the size and strength, but just needs to develop those nuances of his game to succeed at the next level. And a lot of that will be down to coaching, but I think based on raw talent and ability, he's got all of the tools there to succeed. So be interesting to see. There's been people saying they think he'll go outside the top 10 and Hutchinson's the top talent, but we'll just wait to see on draft day. But he's going to be a fun guy to watch as well. Talking of players with some definite tools in their arsenal, we're on to my plays of the week. So new Saints head coach Dennis Allen says that Taysom Hill will focus on playing tight end next season, with them re-signing Jameis Winston to a 2-year deal to be their starting quarterback. I've chosen a couple of rushing plays from Taysom Hill and then also chosen a couple of receiving plays because I think although he's going to primarily play tight end, which is what Dennis Allen says, I think he'll still be used in quite a versatile way. So I wanted to kind of shine a light on his size, his speed, his ability to rush, and also his ability to receive. So my first play of the week is his first touchdown that was against the New York Giants in week 4 of last season. So on 2nd and 1 in the Giants' red zone, he lined up under center with the score at 7-7. He rushes to get the first down, and it looks like he stopped, but then he powers out of about 5 different tackles and gets in for the touchdown. So it was impressive stuff, just showing off his strength, and obviously he took the ball from under center, so I think we're going to still see that a lot next year. My next play from him comes from the game against the Jets in week 14. This was his second rushing touchdown of the game. Saints were up 23-9, and it was on 3rd and 12. He found a gap on the left-hand side and then burst through, taking the ball in for a 44-yard rushing touchdown. I like this play because it just kind of showed off his natural speed, and when he hits that gap, he can make some crazy plays. He was used a bit less as a receiver last season, so I didn't really have any receiving plays from last season. He started a lot more games at quarterback, so I'm going to take you back to 2020 for this play of the week. So this was Week 8 versus the Bears. 1st and 10, up 16-13 in the 4th quarter. Taysom runs a route and he finds a gap in the secondary to take it in for a 20-yard receiving touchdown. That was thrown by Drew Brees. I like this play because of the step that he takes when he runs the route. It's quite a nice cut to get himself open, and it sort of shows some of his potential as a receiver because he's been used as a receiver. I think he had 6 receiving touchdowns in 2020. So he can obviously play it, but I think if you're going to throw him as a tight end and do these kind of plays, then he showed the potential he's got. Now moving to 2019, Week 17 versus the Panthers. So this play was a bit of a broken coverage, but on 3rd and 7 with the Saints up 35-3, Drew Brees passes to Hill, who's wide open about 5 yards down from the line of scrimmage. He shows off his agility and then powers through into the end zone for a 45-yard receiving touchdown. I think because of these plays and how he can rush the ball, how fast he is, his ability to catch the ball and make some hard contested catches as well because of his size, I'm really looking forward to see how he's actually used as a receiver, and it's just going to be very, very fun to watch. And I'm also looking forward to seeing Jameis Winston back because he had a good start to last season, and then obviously that unfortunate ACL injury. And Dennis Allen obviously won that game with the Saints against the Bucks in the second half of last year's season, so there's a lot of potential there. So yeah, the Saints are going to be a good team to watch next year. Now on to controversies. So we've spoken about the plays of the week, but now it's time to talk about some interesting stuff that's happened in the NFL this week. So to start with, Bruce Arians retired, and Todd Bowles is now taking over as the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Arians will now move into the front office. He said he wanted to give Bowles the best opportunity to succeed, stating that a lot of head coaches come into situations where they're set up to fail. Obviously, sometimes you get coaches that get fired for bad seasons, so then you might have a new head coach come in and take over a team that was 3-13 or 4-12, and so they've got kind of to start from almost the ground up and go from there. So Bowles went 24 wins and 40 losses in his New York Jets tenure. But I feel like this is a similar situation to McDaniels. Obviously, when you look at the team that the Bucs have, like Brady's come back at quarterback, you've got stars on defense, you've got stars on offense. You know, they just re-signed Leonard Fournette, you got Mike Evans, they re-signed Chris Godwin. So you've got a lot of good players there, and so Bowles has a lot to work with. And I think, as Arians said, like putting him in a situation where he can succeed with such a good team is good. I think he's gonna, in terms of being similar to Josh McDaniels, he's obviously not. He was last head coach for the New York Jets in 2018. McDaniels was obviously a head coach for the Broncos a while ago, and that didn't work out too well. But I think now you look at it, and they've got some more years experience. They've got the pieces around them, more actual pieces on the team. They've got owners who are actually doing well in free agency as well, like general managers doing well in free agency. So I think it puts Bowles in a good position. And obviously during the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Super Bowl run last year, forgetting what year we were in for a second, last year, obviously their defense was such a key part of that, and Todd Bowles was at the helm of that defense, so that's great. there was some talk about potentially Brady pushing Arians out, and that's why this has happened. I don't think it really matters. I think it's something for the media to talk about. But I think at the end of the day, Arians has been a real champion of, black coaches and female coaches and all that on his team. Like when you look at the staff they had during the playoffs last year, and obviously going forwards, like it was amazing the amount of diversity and different people there. So I think, it's a classy move by Arians, and I also don't think it really matters. I think obviously Brady has a lot of influence wherever he goes, but to be honest, it kind of, even if that is the case, it works well for Bowles anyway. He can kind of be in a good position where he can build up that team. He can start from a good place, and then if Brady has more influence on the offense, then that kind of works. So I'd say it's a good position. And also, Bowles is 58. Brady's not going to play for another 12 years, no matter what anyone says. He's not going to play till the time he's 57. He might play for another 5 years. That wouldn't surprise me. But if you think maybe Bowles is head coach because Bruce Arians just retired at 70. So even if Bowles is coach for 12 years, there's going to be, a certain amount of that with Brady. But then after a certain amount of time, he'll be out there on his own without Brady. And obviously there'll be certain players that will have retired by then. But I think this puts him in a good position to get into a rhythm as a head coach until then. Moving on to more talk about quarterbacks, because we never stop. So Colin Kaepernick threw at the weekend at Michigan University's halftime of their spring game, and he made some good passes. People seemed quite impressed with him. He said he's happy to be a backup in the NFL. And I think, ever since he got blackballed in 2016, it's a bit surprising when you look at some of the players that are still quarterbacks in the NFL and are backups and have just had some shocking games. At least with someone like him, although towards the end of his career, he wasn't exactly playing his most incredible football. He's still been to a Super Bowl. He's still played a lot of playoff games. He's still, he's got that experience. You could sign him to a practice squad, or you could sign him as like your second string backup, and you'd still get a lot of value out of him. It kind of felt like that teams were potentially worried that he'd be a distraction a few years ago with everything with him kneeling at the national anthem and all this. But in my opinion, when someone like Deshaun Watson gets traded with outstanding civil lawsuits, that pretty much proves that theory. If teams want a good player, then they'll get a good player. And I feel like, Kaepernick's now been linked to the Seahawks. I spoke about Malik Willis earlier. If they draft Willis and then they put a veteran quarterback like Kaepernick behind him to just sort of mentor him and be like, right, okay, this is what it's been like in the playoffs. This is what it's been there. Obviously, also Kaepernick, who was a great rusher in his career as a quarterback. There's at least some parallels there. And, as I said, he wasn't the most amazing player to end his career, but Nathan Peterman was still on the Raiders squad the last couple of seasons after he's got like a 3 touchdown to 12 interception ratio in his career. And, he had that very notable 5 interception game against the Bills when he was a starter for a game. And it's just like, there's some definite worse quarterbacks out there. So I hope he gets his shot. As I said, he's been linked to the Seahawks, so we'll see what happens there. Now moving on to the Saints and the Eagles, who traded some picks for this draft. So details of the trade. The Eagles trade 2 of their 2022 first round picks, number 16 and number 19, for the Saints' 2022 first round pick, number 18, and then their 2023 first round pick. Eagles also receive a 2024 second round pick, 2022 third round pick, which is number 101, and a 2022 seventh round pick, 237, while sending a 2022 sixth round pick, 194. I feel like I was just auctioning off something there. That was a lot of numbers to deal with. I like my numbers. That's a lot of numbers. I think, this is a really good move by the Eagles. I think Howie Roseman is definitely helping his case as GM. There's been some talks of people who weren't too big of a fan of some of the moves he's made. But the Eagles still picked twice in the first round this year because they also own the number 15 pick. So now they pick at 15 and 18. So they basically get a few more picks back and they still pick almost in the same position. When you look, the Eagles made the playoffs last year in a development year. They didn't exactly have the hardest schedule, but they've got a ton of picks. Jalen Hurts is showing some development now after his first season as a proper starter. He was getting more comfortable and throwing some nicer, accurate passes towards the end of the season. There was a few times earlier on where he wasn't exactly the most accurate player in the entire world, but he definitely improved. And then not just that, but you've got a second-year head coach. Nick Sirianni was a rookie head coach last year. So you've got him going into his second year as a head coach, Hurts going into his second year as a starter. You've got all the picks. You're coming from being a playoff team last year. So I think you've got the pieces in place for the Eagles to really, really develop. And also, when you think about it, Hurts had a pretty good season when you think about his passing and rushing stats. But his main receivers were, Ertz was traded in the middle of the season. So he had Dallas Goedert and then Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith was a rookie. He had over 900 yards and had a great season, but also he was a rookie and basically developed into the number one receiver. Behind that, Quez Watkins had the third most receiving yards on the team. So yeah, you got a number one tight end, number one receiver who also was a rookie, but then you had Quez Watkins behind them, and he was a sixth round pick in 2020. So you've not exactly got the biggest and best receiving corps around Hurts to work with. So I think now you get some of these picks. There's some good receivers in this class who I'll chat about. I'll chat about a receiver next week on the spotlight part. And you can start to build around Hurts and build some players. So as he starts to develop more and more, then obviously you put him in a better position. And also I think, for next season, they definitely need to get Miles Sanders more involved. He kind of fell by the wayside a bit last year, even when he returned after being injured. And I just think he's such a dynamic player, and he's shown he could be such a dynamic player and such a lead back. So it's just strange how he wasn't really involved, and the team kind of went with Jordan Howard as the tailback towards the second half of last season. He's nowhere near as good of a player as Sanders. Sanders can run routes, Sanders can rush, he can do everything. And so it's just like they need to get him more involved. And then I think there was a lot of places where the Eagles did well where they opened up that play action game. And so obviously if you get more of a dynamic rushing attack going, that puts Hurts in a better position, even for just rushing himself, because teams will want to be playing that run. It puts him in better places for play action. So I think that's good. They obviously re-signed Boston Scott, and then they drafted Kenneth Gainwell last year. Gainwell showed some good flashes as a receiver in that. So I think you've got Sanders as your lead back, and then you've got Scott and Gainwell behind him. Maybe you sign another player who's like a bit more of a power back, because in terms of size, Gainwell and Scott aren't the biggest players. So I think maybe if you sign another player, maybe even re-sign Howard, but just have him more as a guy who comes in and spells on early downs or later in the game just to keep Sanders healthy. But, get Sanders more involved. I don't even think he had a touchdown last season, which is just absolutely insane for the amount of yards he actually had. So, yeah, good move by the Saints to move up and pick twice in the first round this year. I already spoke about Winston and Hill earlier, so they were in cap hell, and now they've moved to being able to be in a good position with their cap, and they also picked twice in the first round. So this is great for them. Great for Dennis Allen to start putting his stamp on the Saints as well. And yeah, really good stuff. Okay, great. So that was all the NFL stuff covered in this episode. Bit different from the free agency episodes, but now let's move on to my album of the week. So my album of the week this week is White Lies, Big TV. So you'll probably remember in the first episode of the podcast, I mentioned the White Lies album 5v2, which was my album of the week. So a bit more information about White Lies. White Lies are an English indie rock band from Ealing in London. I actually saw them live a couple of weeks ago. They released their new album back in February, and they were currently on a European tour. I actually discovered them through a girl I was dating a few months back, and now they're one of my favorite bands. They're just great. Like as I said before, they're a combination of kind of like Tears for Fears. There's different elements. There's some kind of Editors elements. There's a bit of The Cure there. Just, a combination of some great bands, and they're just really fun to listen to if you want some more kind of, low beat songs, some more somber ones, they've got that. If you want something a bit more dancey, you've got some more dancey songs from them. So you've just got a mix of stuff, and I'm very much all about that. I'm very much about bands honing a sound, but then within that sound having a lot of variety. I think the best songs to check out on the album are Big TV, There Goes Our Love Again, and Tricky to Love. Those are kind of the cliff notes for if you don't want to listen to the whole album. I'd say listen to those because you'll love them. I went out with my mates at the weekend, and it kind of became a running joke because I became pretty obsessed with the band earlier in this year, and I kept mentioning them. And then one of my friends was like, "Oh, is this White Lies playing?" Every time I was playing a different song, and then I put on Big TV, and he was like, sort of sheepishly, "What's the name of that song again?" I was like, "Oh, okay, now you're interested, are you?" So, you might be, I've mentioned them a few times, but you do eventually succumb to the White Lies hype and have no choice. So yeah, White Lies, Big TV, check that out. Okay, thank you for listening. This was episode 6 of the Clutchdown podcast. Follow me on all the social medias at Clutchdown Pod and at Clutchdown Podcast. You'll find me quite easily. Next week, I'll be back to chat more about the NFL and also about all of the draft prospects as we start to move closer to the NFL draft this month. Beautiful. Thanks a lot, everyone, and catch you soon.